Barkley Sterling made 3 mistakes the night he threw his wife out. First, packing her belongings in trash bags like garbage. Second, calling her life's work an adorable charity. Third, forgetting that his $33 million deal, the one that would make or break his company, required approval from Community Rise Foundation, the nonprofit his wife had built, the empire he dismissed as a hobby. In 3 days, she'd walk into his boardroom meeting, and by the time she walked out, his profit margin would be cut in half. Viewers, before we dive into this shocking story, I want to ask a favor. If you're watching from Australia, any city in the USA, the United Kingdom, or anywhere else in the world, drop your location in the comments right now. I want to see how far this voice is reaching. And while you're down there, hit that subscribe button. Here's why you should. Stories like these, real stories about real people facing unimaginable situations, they don't just entertain. They teach us something about human behavior, about love, about trust, about what people do in their closets. By subscribing, you're joining a family that values love, that appreciates storytelling, and that isn't afraid to discuss the uncomfortable realities of relationships and betrayal. Plus, you're letting the algorithm know that content like this matters. And your comment, well, that starts conversations that might help someone else who's going through something similar. So, go ahead, show some love, subscribe, like, and comment your city. I'll wait. Now, let's get into what happened to Kirby. You need to be out by morning, Barkley said without meeting her eyes. His expensive cologne mixed with the smell of betrayal. She'd recognize that scent anywhere now. Linda's moving in this weekend. Linda, his 29-year-old assistant. The woman who'd smiled at Kirby at the company Christmas party just 3 months ago, complimenting her dress with those perfect white teeth. What about everything we built? Kirby's voice came out calmer than she expected. Years of nonprofit negotiations had taught her never to let them see you break. Barkley actually laughed. The sound cut through the room like broken glass. You mean what I built? Kirby, let's be honest here. You run a charity. It's adorable, really, but Community Rise is a hobby. I'm closing a $33 million deal with Blackwood and Associates next week. That's real money, real work. He tossed another bag at her feet. You'll land on yours. You always do. But Kirby wasn't breaking. Something flickered in her chest. Not grief, not yet. Recognition. The name he just dropped. Blackwood and Associates. The Riverside Development Project. She knew that name. The door slammed at 11:47 p.m. Kirby stood alone in the driveway of the home she'd decorated, holding garbage bags filled with her clothes, watching the porch light. Her porch light. Turn off from the inside. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Jasmine was calling, somehow knowing something was wrong. Kirby sat in her car outside the house, unable to drive yet. Her hands shook on the steering wheel. When Jasmine's call came through at 11:52, she answered with a voice that cracked only when she said Linda's name. She downloaded everything through tears and fury. The affair, the dismissal, the garbage bags, the hobby comment. Jasmine listened without interrupting, the way she'd done for 30 years of friendship. But when Kirby mentioned the Blackwood deal, something shifted in Jasmine's voice. Wait. Jasmine's paralegal instincts kicked in immediately. Barkley's Blackwood deal. The Riverside Development Project. Kirby's breath caught in her throat. Oh my God. The one that requires community partnership approval. From a certified nonprofit. Kirby's voice transformed from broken to crystalline clear. From Community Rise. Then Jasmine asked a question that changed everything. Kirby, you signed that contract 2 months ago. Did Barkley ever read it? The silence between them held the weight of revelation. Through the phone, Kirby could hear Jasmine already pulling up files on her computer, the familiar clicking of keys that meant her best friend was shifting from comfort to strategy. Send me the city's zoning regulations, Kirby said, her breathing slowing from panicked to focused. I need to be sure before I make my next move. She glanced at the house one more time. The bedroom light was on now. Barkley and Linda, already occupying the space she'd left warm. The image should have destroyed her. Instead, it crystallized something she hadn't felt in years. Power. At 1:30 in the morning, Kirby checked into a Hampton Inn with her trash bags. The night clerk didn't ask questions. She probably saw this scenario more often than Kirby wanted to imagine. The room smelled like industrial cleaning solution and other people's lives, but it was hers for the night. She spread contract documents across the floral bedspread. The Blackwood partnership agreement she'd signed 2 months ago sat on top. 63 pages of legal language she'd reviewed carefully, because that's what she did. She read every contract, every clause, every requirement. Barkley had never asked about her work. Not once in 22 years had he inquired about community rise beyond polite dinner party conversation. He had no idea what she actually did, what power she actually held. And there it was. Page 47, Section 12. Buried in implementation language that most people would skim over. All development phases require written approval and ongoing oversight from Community Rise Foundation. Executive Director K. Sterling, as mandated by City Ordinance 2847B. Partnership termination by either party results in automatic contract nullification and project suspension. Not just approval. Oversight. Not just involvement. Control. Kirby read it 3 times, her finger tracing each word. The coffee from the lobby tasted like cardboard, but she was wide awake now, her mind racing through implications and possibilities. This wasn't a minor consultation role. This was authority over every decision, every phase, every dollar spent. Barkley had bet everything on a deal that required her signature. At 2:47 a.m., Kirby opened her laptop and accessed their shared cloud drive. The one Barkley never bothered to password protect from her, because her work was just a hobby. After all, why would she need to be locked out of his business files? His entire Blackwood pitch deck loaded on her screen. Financial projections, development timeline, profit margins, investor commitments. She scrolled through spreadsheet after spreadsheet, and with each page, the scope of his vulnerability became clearer. He'd leveraged everything. Second mortgage on the house. Business loans secured against his company's assets. Investor capital that had to be repaid with interest regardless of outcome. The deal represented 87% of his company's total valuation. But the number that made her stop scrolling was the one highlighted in red at the bottom of his risk assessment. $14 million in development debt that only gets repaid if this deal closes. He bet everything. If Blackwood walked away, Barkley didn't just lose profit. He lost everything. The mansion, the cars, Linda's expensive lifestyle. His entire company would collapse under the weight of debt he'd accumulated preparing for this development. He bet his entire empire on a deal that required approval from the wife he'd just thrown out like garbage. Kirby saved every file to her own secure drive. At 3 a.m., a calendar notification popped up on her phone, one she'd forgotten about in the chaos of the night. Blackwood Associates Partnership Meeting. Thursday, 2 p.m. That was tomorrow, less than 15 hours away. She stared at the notification. Catherine Blackwood had sent it 3 weeks ago to her nonprofit email address. Professional correspondence. Official meeting. Required attendance as the community partner of record. Barkley had no idea she'd be there. Wednesday morning found Kirby sitting in a Waffle House booth at 7 a.m. She hadn't slept, couldn't sleep, but adrenaline kept her sharp. When Jasmine slid into the seat across from her, 2 cups of coffee already steaming between them, Kirby laid out everything. The contract, the leverage, Barkley's complete exposure, the $14 million in debt. I could destroy him. Kirby said quietly, her hands wrapped around the war mug. One email to Catherine Blackwood explaining that Community Rise withdraws partnership approval, and he loses everything. His company, his house, Linda, all of it. Jasmine studied her friend's face. 30 years of friendship meant she could read every micro-expression, every hesitation. Is that what you want? I don't know what I want. Kirby's voice cracked for the first time since the betrayal. I just know I have power now, and I don't know what to do with it. Jasmine asked the question that changed everything. Do you want to destroy the man or build the project? Kirby looked up, confused. Jasmine pulled out her phone and navigated to Community Rise's website, pulling up the mission statement, creating pathways to dignity through sustainable community development. This deal, Jasmine continued, her voice gentle but firm, could fund your work for a decade. Affordable housing for thousands of families. Community resources. Everything you've been fighting for. Where you could burn it all down and take them with it. She paused. What serves the mission? The question hung in the air between them, competing with the clatter of dishes and the smell of hash browns. Kirby thought about the families she served. The single mothers waiting for affordable housing. The elderly residents who needed community centers. The mission she'd built over 15 years. The mission, Kirby said finally. The mission matters more than revenge. Then what's the play? Kirby's eyes hardened with new resolve. I'm not approving his project as designed. It underserves the community. But I'm redesigning it into something better. Something that actually fulfills our mission. And he'll have to accept my terms or lose everything. She pulled out her phone and texted Catherine Blackwood, confirming my attendance tomorrow at 2 p.m. We need to discuss contract modifications before approval. Wednesday afternoon, Kirby walked into Community Rise headquarters for the first time since the eviction. Her assistant, Devin, looked shocked at her composed appearance. He'd obviously heard something through the grapevine. Small nonprofit communities talked. I need every file we have on the Riverside development, Kirby said without preamble. Impact assessments, community feedback, sustainability reports, zoning compliance. Everything. Devin hesitated. Are you sure you want to work today? We heard about every file, Devin. Now, please. She spent 6 hours buried in documents. Barclay's proposal allocated 15% to affordable housing, the bare minimum required by law. His timeline eliminated the community center space entirely to maximize residential units. His environmental plan was perfunctory at best. His entire approach prioritized profit over people. It was exactly what she'd expected from someone who saw her work as a hobby. She wasn't just preparing to reject it. She was rebuilding it. By 6:47 p.m., Kirby had a complete counterproposal. 40% affordable housing instead of 15%. Community center with healthcare access and childcare facilities. Green spaces and sustainable infrastructure. Public transportation integration. Job training partnerships. The changes would drop Barclay's profit margin from 40% to 18%. Cut his take by more than half. But it would serve 10,000 families instead of 3,000. It would fulfill Community Rise's mission. It would be what affordable housing development should be. Devin watched her work with growing understanding. This is brilliant, he said, reviewing her modifications. This is what that project should have been from the start. It's what I would have required anyway, Kirby said, even if he hadn't thrown me out. The difference is, now he doesn't get to fight me at home about it. He has to face me across a boardroom table. She wasn't just preparing. She was rebuilding, not just the project, but herself. Does Barclay know you'll be at tomorrow's meeting? Devin asked. Kirby's small smile contained multitudes. No, and that's the point. Wednesday night at 11 p.m., Kirby sat in her Hampton Inn room practicing her presentation. She refined her talking points, anticipated objections, prepared responses. Professional, precise, powerful. But at midnight, she made a mistake. She opened her photo album. Wedding photos. Their honeymoon in Santorini. Anniversary dinners. 22 years captured in pixels. She scrolled through images of a woman who smiled for cameras, who stood beside a man who never quite looked at her, who built a life around someone else's dreams. The tears came then. Not for the marriage. She'd been mourning that slowly for years without realizing it. She cried for the woman in those photos who didn't know her worth, who spent 2 decades making herself smaller so someone else could feel bigger, who called her empire hobby because someone she loved told her it was. Then something inside her shifted. She texted herself a reminder. This isn't about him. It's about 10,000 families who need housing. The mission matters more than the marriage ever did. She deleted the photo album. Every single photo. Years of memories erased with a swipe and a confirmation. It felt like exhaling after holding her breath for 2 decades. She closed her laptop, set her alarm for 6 a.m., laid out her navy suit on the chair, the one she'd worn accepting her nonprofit leadership award last year, the one Barkley hadn't attended because he had a golf tournament. She took off her wedding ring and set on the nightstand. Tomorrow, she would walk into that boardroom as executive director Kirby Sterling. Not Barkley's wife, not the woman he dismissed, the woman who controlled his future. Thursday, 2 p.m. The elevator doors opened on the 14th floor of Blackwood Associates. Kirby stepped into the glass-walled lobby, her heels clicking on marble floors. Through the conference room windows, she could see them already gathered, 12 people around an enormous table, Atlanta's skyline stretching behind them like a promise. Barkley sat at the head of the table in his power position, confident and relaxed. His presentation glowed on the screen behind him. Sterling Development Proposal, Riverside Project. He was mid-sentence, selling his vision with the charisma that had built his company. Catherine Blackwood sat to his right, reviewing documents. She checked her watch and held up one hand, interrupting Barkley mid-pitch. We're waiting for one more person. Barkley looked annoyed at the interruption. Can we start? I'm sure whoever it is can catch up. The conference room door opened. Kirby walked in. Time seemed to slow. Every head turned. Barkley's face drained of color. She watched the blood literally leave his features, his confident expression collapsing into shock. He stopped speaking mid-word, his mouth still open. Catherine stood, smiling. Everyone, this is Kirby Sterling, Executive Director of Community Rise Foundation, our required community partner for this development. The name registered around the table. Several executives glanced between Barkley and Kirby, making connections. Same last name. The awkwardness spread through the room like spilled water. Barkley couldn't speak. Kirby took the empty seat directly across from her husband. Former husband, she corrected herself mentally. She set her leather portfolio on the table with deliberate precision. Made eye contact with Catherine. Smiled professionally. Good afternoon, everyone. My apologies for the timing. Traffic. She opened her portfolio, pulled out her counterproposal documents. Shall we begin? Catherine gestured to Kirby. We've reviewed Mr. Sterling's development proposal. I believe you have some thoughts on the community partnership terms? I do have thoughts. Kirby's voice carried the authority of 15 years building community rise from nothing. She distributed her counterproposal around the table. Everyone received a copy except Barkley. A small power move, but effective. The current plan allocates 15% to affordable housing. Kirby began, her tone professional and measured. City Ordinance 2847. B requires a minimum of 25% for community rise approval. Mr. Sterling's timeline also eliminates the community center space entirely, which violates our partnership requirements. Barkley found his voice, trying charm. Kirby, perhaps we should discuss this privately. She cut him off with surgical precision. Miss Sterling, please. And no, Mr. Sterling, this discussion belongs exactly where it is, in this boardroom with all stakeholders present. She didn't look at him. She addressed Catherine and the Blackwood team. I have a revised proposal that meets our mission requirements. She walked them through her counter-proposal. 40% affordable housing. Community center with integrated healthcare access and childcare facilities. Green infrastructure. Public transportation integration. Sustainable building practices. Job training partnerships with local unions. The changes were comprehensive, professional, undeniably better for the community. They also cut Barkley's profit margin from 40% to 18%. She wasn't done. She presented impact assessments, community feedback data, sustainability projections. Every argument backed by research. Every requirement justified by mission. Catherine reviewed the numbers, her expression shifting from interested to impressed. This is actually substantially better for our corporate responsibility profile. The ESG metrics alone. She showed the spreadsheet to her team. Nods around the table. Barkley tried to interrupt 3 times. Each time, Kirby talked over him with facts, figures, and professional authority. She'd spent 15 years negotiating with city councils and corporate partners. She knew how to control a room. The question before this partnership, Kirby concluded, is whether we're building adequate housing or transformational housing. Community Rise can only approve transformational projects. Mr. Sterling's current proposal is adequate. My revised proposal is transformational. She sat down. Let the silence do its work. Barkley's hands gripped the table edge. You can't just restructure the entire deal. I can, Kirby said simply. And I am. Section 12 of our partnership agreement grants Community Rise oversight authority on all development phases. This is oversight. She turned to Catherine. The revised proposal serves 10,000 families instead of 3,000. It creates community infrastructure that will benefit residents for generations. And it still generates substantial profit for Sterling Development, just not excessive profit. Catherine looked at the numbers again, at Kirby's professional presentation, at Barkley's increasingly desperate expression. Ms. Sterling raises valid points. Valid points. Barkley's voice rose. He stood, face flushed, pointing at Kirby. You're doing this because you're angry. This is personal, not professional. This is revenge. The room went silent. The personal attack hung in the air, uncomfortable and inappropriate. Everyone knew they were witnessing something beyond business. Kirby remained seated, calm, and let the silence breathe. Let Barkley's outburst reveal him. Then she spoke, her voice steady and clear. Mr. Sterling, I'm doing this because 10,000 families need housing and your proposal serves 3,000. I'm doing this because Community Rise has a mission, and my job, my calling, is to fulfill that mission. Your personal life and mine is irrelevant to that mission. She turned to Catherine, ignoring Barkley entirely now. The question is simple. Does Blackwood want a good project or a great one? Because I can only approve great ones. Those are our standards. They were our standards last month, they're our standards today, and they'll be our standards next month. The room had already chosen. Every executive at that table was nodding, reviewing Kirby's proposal with genuine interest. The professional had defeated the personal. Catherine looked at Barkley, her expression business neutral. Mr. Sterling, perhaps you'd like a 15-minute recess to review the modified terms? It wasn't a question. It was a directive. The conference room emptied for recess. Executives filed out, some glancing back at the obvious tension. Catherine placed a hand briefly on Kirby's shoulder as she passed, a small gesture of support that spoke volumes. Kirby gathered her materials slowly, deliberately. She'd said what needed to be said, done what needed to be done. The rest was Barclay's choice. Kirby, his voice behind her, stripped of its earlier bravado. Please. She turned. They were alone in the glass-walled room, visible to everyone in the hallway, but unable to be heard. You'll bankrupt me. His voice dropped to desperate. The $14 million in debt. I leveraged everything on this deal. If you force these changes, I lose half my profit. I'll barely break even after paying investors. The house, the cars, everything. For the first time since walking through that door, Kirby really looked at him. Not the confident man who threw her out. Not the husband who dismissed her work. She saw someone small and scared, facing consequences for the first time. You call my life's work a hobby, she said quietly. You threw me out like garbage. You replaced me before the bed was cold. She paused, making sure he heard every word. But here's the truth, Barclay. I'm not doing this to you. I'm doing this for them. Those 10,000 families matter more than your ego, more than our marriage, more than revenge. His jaw clenched. So that's it? You destroy me and feel righteous about it. I'm not destroying you. Her voice carried weight now, finality. I'm requiring you to build something meaningful instead of something profitable. Sign the deal. Take the 18%. Rebuild your company on a sustainable foundation. Or walk away and lose everything. That choice was always yours. I'm just making you face it. She walked past him toward the elevator. Her heels clicked on marble with absolute certainty. She didn't look back. Behind her, reflected in the glass walls, she saw Barclay standing alone at the head of an empty table, finally understanding what she'd always been. Not a hobby, an empire. The elevator doors closed on Kirby's calm face. 15 minutes later, everyone reconvened. The tension in the room was palpable. Catherine had the revised contract ready. Modifications incorporated, profit margins adjusted, oversight authority confirmed. Community rise approval contingent on implementation compliance. Mr. Sterling, Catherine said, her tone purely professional. Do we have a deal? Barclay sat, but wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. He looked at the contract in front of him. 63 pages that would save his company, but destroy his pride. He signed without reading. His hand shook slightly as he wrote his name. No comments. No negotiation. No fight left. Catherine slid the document across to Kirby. Miss Sterling. Kirby read every modified clause carefully. Professional to the end. Then she signed her name with a steady hand. K. Sterling, Executive Director, Community Rise Foundation. Catherine gathered the contracts, satisfied. As she organized the documents, she leaned close to Kirby and said quietly, "That was the most professional devastation I've ever witnessed." Kirby smiled. 22 years of practice. The irony landed perfectly. All those years of negotiation training, of building community rise, of learning to hold power with grace. She'd been preparing for this moment without knowing it. The hobby had become the weapon. The dismissed work had become her armor. She stood to leave. Barclay remained seated, staring at the contract with his signature still drying. Mr. Sterling, Kirby said from the doorway, her voice carrying across the room one last time. Build something you can be proud of. That's all I ever wanted you to do. The door closed behind her. The Riverside Development groundbreaking ceremony drew a crowd of 300. City officials in suits. Press photographers jockeying for position. Future residents holding children's hands, hope visible on their faces. Community Rise staff wearing matching navy jackets. A massive banner stretched across the construction fence. Riverside Commons, a Community Rise partnership. Kirby stood at the podium in a cream suit, transformed. The woman who'd been thrown out in trash bags 6 months ago had been replaced by someone who commanded rooms. The ceremony had the energy of something significant, not just another development, but a model for what community-first building could be. Mayor Rodriguez approached the microphone first, delivering the political speech about job creation and economic development. But then he shifted tone. This project almost didn't happen the way you see it today. It took one person's courage and vision to transform a standard development into something transformational. Ladies and gentlemen, Executive Director Kirby Sterling. The applause was genuine. Kirby stepped to the podium, looking out at faces she recognized. Community members she'd served for 15 years, partners she'd built relationships with, families waiting for the housing this project would create. 6 months ago, Kirby began, her voice steady through the sound system. This project was going to build housing for 3,000 families. Today, because of partnerships and persistence, it will serve 10,000. She gestured to the construction site behind her. This is what happens when we prioritize people over profit. When we build with purpose instead of building for maximum return. Catherine Blackwood stepped up to join her, taking the second microphone. Blackwood and Associates is proud to announce that we're replicating this community-first model in 3 additional cities: Seattle, Chicago, and Miami, all in partnership with Community Rise Foundation. The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Journalists scribbled notes. The story was already being framed. Innovative nonprofit leader transforms affordable housing development, creates national model. But someone was watching from the back of the crowd. Barkley stood alone, away from the VIP section where he would have been 6 months ago. He wore a nice suit, but not an extravagant one. His company had survived, but shrunk. He'd paid his debts, scaled down, restructured. The mansion was sold. Linda had left after 3 months. Too young, she'd said. Too different. The truth was simpler. She'd signed up for luxury, not rebuilding. He lived in a condo now, drove a practical car, worked longer hours with smaller margins. The 18% profit from Riverside had saved his company but humbled his lifestyle. He wasn't bitter, though. That surprised him most. Standing in the back, watching Kirby at the podium surrounded by grateful families and impressed officials, he felt something he hadn't expected. Understanding. He watched her kneel down to talk to a little girl, watched her laugh with an elderly couple, watched her move through the crowd with genuine joy. This was always who she was. He just never paid attention. He'd been married to an empire builder and called it a hobby. The failure wasn't hers. It was his. Devin, Kirby's assistant, approached him carefully. "Mr. Sterling?" Miss Sterling asked if he'd like to join the VIP section. Barkley shook his head, genuine in his decline. "No, this is her day. I needed to see it." For the first time, he understood what he'd destroyed. Not a marriage that had been dying slowly for years. He destroyed his chance to be part of something meaningful. His chance to build alongside someone remarkable. Tell her he stopped. What could he say? Tell her it's impressive. What she's built. Devin nodded and walked away. Barkley stayed for another 20 minutes, watching from the periphery, then slipped away before the ceremony ended. In the VIP section, Kirby caught his departure from the corner of her eye. A moment of acknowledgement passed between them across the crowd. Not forgiveness, something more complex. Recognition that they'd both moved on to different lives. She turned back to the celebration, to the families thanking her, to the future being built literally behind her. An hour after the ceremony, the crowd had thinned. Kirby stood near the construction fence with her team, reviewing blueprints with the site manager. The foundation was already poured. Steel frameworks rose against the Atlanta skyline. Progress visible and tangible. She heard footsteps behind her and knew, without turning, who it was. The team noticed, exchanged glances, stepped away tactfully. We'll give you a moment, Devin said quietly. Kirby and Barkley stood 5 feet apart with an entire construction site between them. Literally and metaphorically, building was happening in the space where their marriage used to be. You really did build an empire, Barkley said. Not an apology, an observation. It was never a hobby. Kirby turned to face him, clear-eyed. No, it wasn't. But you couldn't see it because you weren't looking. Brief silence. Construction workers moved equipment in the background. Life continuing around them while they finished old business. How are you? Kirby asked, and meant it genuinely. Smaller, Barkley admitted. The company scaled down. Linda left. I sold the house. He smiled slightly. Learning things about myself. Most of them uncomfortable. That's called growth, Kirby said without judgment. His next question surprised her. Does it feel good? The revenge. Kirby considered the question seriously. This wasn't revenge, Barkley. Revenge would have been making you lose everything. Revenge would have been destroying your company and walking away satisfied. She gestured at the construction site. This was me finally choosing the mission over the man. What's the difference? Revenge is about punishing the past. This was about building the future. She looked at the steel frameworks, the foundation, the possibilities rising from dirt. 10,000 families will live here. That mattered more than hurting you ever could. Barkley absorbed this, nodding slowly. Then he asked the question that had haunted him for 6 months. Would you have approved the original project? If I hadn't, if we hadn't ended, would you have let it through? Kirby's answer came without hesitation. No. The certainty in her voice stopped him. I would have flagged the same issues, requested the same changes, required the same standards. That's my job. The difference is you would have fought me at home instead of in a boardroom. We'd probably still be married, both miserable, with you resenting me for making you less successful. She paused, making sure he heard the next part. You throwing me out? That was the kindest thing you could have done. It freed us both to become who we actually are. She meant every word. The reframing was complete, the betrayal as liberation. Barkley processed this, his expression shifting through denial, resistance, and finally acceptance. That's a generous interpretation. It's an honest one. Kirby's voice softened. We were holding each other back. You needed to learn you can't by meaning. I needed to learn my worth doesn't require your validation. She smiled slightly. It took garbage bags and a $33 million deal, but we both learned. He nodded slowly, understanding finally settling into his bones. I hope you build 1,000 of these. I intend to. Barkley walked away then, not angry, not destroyed. Released. Kirby watched him go, feeling lighter than she had in 22 years. Sometimes the end of something wrong makes room for everything right. Evening. A local restaurant in Virginia Highland. Warm lighting and exposed brick. Community Rise team celebrating around a long table. Wine flowing. Laughter genuine. They were celebrating more than Riverside. 3 new projects, national recognition. The model going viral in urban planning circles. Devin raised his glass. To Kirby, who taught us that community first isn't charity. It's the smartest investment we can make. Everyone drank. Someone mentioned Kirby had made Atlanta Business Journal's top 50 leaders under 50. Someone else talked about the requests pouring in from other cities wanting to replicate the model. Jasmine, sitting next to Kirby, leaned over. You did it. You actually changed the industry. We did it, Kirby corrected. Community Rise is bigger than me. But her attention shifted when someone unexpected walked through the restaurant door. A young woman, early 30s, professional clothes, holding the hand of a little girl about 7 years old. They approached the table hesitantly until Kirby recognized them. Sophia. Kirby stood, shocked. Sophia Martinez? Miss Sterling. Sophia's smile was nervous but warm. I hope it's okay. We crashed your celebration. I saw the Riverside news, and I had to thank you in person. Kirby remembered. Sophia had been one of Community Rise's first residents 8 years ago. Single mother, escaping domestic violence, working 2 jobs. Community Rise had given her stable housing, childcare support, job training connections. This is my daughter, Elena, Sophia continued. The little girl waved shyly. She starts college next year. Architecture program at Georgia Tech. She wants to design buildings like the ones you create. Then someone unexpected walked in. Kirby's throat tightened. She pulled Sophia and Elena into a hug, tears forming for the first time since the boardroom meeting. Not tears of pain, tears of purpose realized. This was what the 18% profit margin had bought. This was what choosing mission over revenge had created. Generational change. A little girl who would grow up to design buildings because her mother had stable housing. Her team watched, understanding why they did this work. Why the mission mattered more than maximum profit. Why Kirby had restructured that deal. You gave us our lives, Sophia said quietly. Everything we have now started in that apartment Community Rise provided. After Sophia and Elena left, Jasmine pulled Kirby aside to the restaurant patio. String lights glowed overhead, city sounds humming in the background. They stood at the railing with fresh wine glasses, best friends who'd navigated 3 decades together. Are you happy? Jasmine asked the question she'd been holding for months. Really happy, not just professionally successful happy. Kirby considered this seriously. I'm not happy yet, but I'm proud and free. And for the first time in 22 years, I'm discovering who I am without someone dismissing it. That's not happiness. That's foundation. Kirby smiled. Happiness is what you build on foundation. Jasmine asked about dating, new relationships, the future. Kirby laughed. Genuine, light, unburdened. I'm 48, starting over, running a national housing initiative that's expanding to 6 cities. If love finds me, wonderful. But I'm not looking. I spent 2 decades building around someone else's needs and dreams. Now I'm building for me, for the mission, for the 10,000 families. You don't need someone? Kirby's answer surprised even herself. I don't need anyone to complete me. I was already complete. I just couldn't see it under 22 years of being unseen. She turned to Jasmine. That's the real victory. Not the boardroom confrontation. Not the business success. The victory is knowing I'm enough. Jasmine raised her glass. To building empires, not relationships. Kirby corrected with a smile. To building empires that serve relationships, just not our own. They clinked glasses, laughing. The sound carried across the patio into the warm Atlanta night. A week later, Kirby stood in her new apartment, surrounded by the last unpacking boxes. Not trash bags this time. Professional moving boxes with labels and organization. The apartment was smaller than the mansion, but every single item in it was her choice. Her furniture, her art, her books arranged exactly how she wanted them. It was hers. Her phone rang. Catherine Blackwood's name appeared on the screen. Kirby, I hope I'm not interrupting your Sunday. Just unpacking. What's up? We're bidding on a Chicago project. $80 million. Mixed-use development in a historically underserved neighborhood. Same community first model you pioneered in Riverside. Catherine paused. Are you interested in expanding Community Rise's reach? Kirby looked around her half-unpacked apartment, at her laptop showing 3 other project requests from cities she'd never visited, at the wall where she'd pinned Sophia's daughter's college acceptance letter. Elena had mailed it to her as a thank you, with a note that said, "You've gave me the foundation to dream." She was exhausted. She was energized. She was building something that mattered. She looked at her new life. Send me the specs. But Catherine? Community Rise chooses the projects based on mission alignment, not profit potential. That's the deal. Every time. Catherine laughed. I wouldn't have it any other way. That's exactly why we want you. Kirby hung up and looked at her apartment again. Empty walls waiting for art. Boxes waiting to be unpacked. A life waiting to be lived on her own terms. Not empty, full of possibility. She started unpacking, humming to herself. On the wall, she hung a framed photo. Not a wedding picture, but the ribbon-cutting ceremony from Community Rise's first project. Her holding giant scissors, surrounded by families, building something that mattered. That was the woman she'd always been. She just finally had the space to become her. Riverside construction progressing through seasons. Steel frameworks becoming buildings. Families moving into completed units. Children playing in community spaces. Sophia's daughter Elena on a college campus, carrying architecture blueprints. Community Rise staff at different sites across multiple cities. Catherine and Kirby shaking hands at new groundbreakings. Devin leading workshops for other nonprofits wanting to replicate the model. And Barkley working at a scaled-down office, meeting with clients, building something sustainable instead of something impressive. Not destroyed. Different. Kirby's voice carries over the images, mature and reflective. People ask if I forgive Barkley. That's the wrong question. Forgiveness implies he had power over my future. He doesn't. He had power over our past, and he used it to free us both from something that stopped working years ago. The montage continues. Community centers opening. Elderly residents in garden spaces. Children in playgrounds. Lives being lived in buildings Kirby restructured. Did it hurt? Yes. Did it destroy me? No. It revealed me. Images of Kirby at different project sites. Teaching, leading, building. Her confidence visible in every frame. The woman he threw out in trash bags isn't the woman building affordable housing across 3 states. But she was always there, buried under 22 years of being unseen. Barkley didn't break me. He accidentally excavated me. Construction images. Demolition and building happening simultaneously. Endings and beginnings in the same frame. At 48, I learned what my 26-year-old self didn't know when I got married. Your worth isn't determined by who loves you, but by what you love. Images of Kirby with families. With children. With elderly residents. With her team. Purpose visible in every interaction. Barkley called Community Rise a hobby. He was wrong. It was always my empire. I was just too busy protecting his to notice. The montage shows contrast. Barkley's old mansion versus Kirby's new apartment. His isolation versus her community. His diminished status versus her expanded influence. The $33 million deal? That was never the victory. The victory was realizing I didn't need his approval to build something that matters. Images of the 3 new projects Catherine mentioned. Seattle, Chicago, Miami, all bearing Community Rise partnerships. The model spreading, the impact multiplying. I didn't need revenge. I needed purpose. And purpose, unlike marriage, doesn't require anyone else's validation. The montage slows. Current footage now. Riverside Commons fully completed. Families living in finished apartments. Community center bustling with activity. Children playing. Elderly residents gardening. A thriving neighborhood where dirt and steel used to be. Some people spend their whole lives waiting to be seen. I spent 22 years invisible in my own marriage. But you know what I discovered? Kirby at the Riverside Community Center, surrounded by residents, teaching a workshop on community organizing. She's laughing, engaged, alive. Being unseen by the wrong person is better than being misunderstood by them. Barkley saw a hobby. The 10,000 families living in housing I created see an empire. I'd rather be seen clearly by people who matter than dimly by someone who doesn't. Images of impact, children doing homework in community center spaces, mothers at job training programs, seniors in healthcare clinics integrated into community rise buildings. Generational change visible and tangible. Here's what they don't tell you about betrayal. Sometimes the person who breaks your heart is actually breaking open the door to who you were always meant to be. Kirby alone now, standing in a new construction site. Hard hat on, blueprints in hand, looking at the future rising from dirt. I'm 48 years old. I've been divorced for 7 months. I run a nonprofit that's reshaping affordable housing in 6 states. I live alone in an apartment I chose. I have no romantic prospects and no interest in finding them right now. She turns to face the camera, direct address, breaking the fourth wall for a moment. And I've never been more powerful in my entire life. The final image. Kirby at a new, groundbreaking ceremony, surrounded by community members, city officials, families. She's wielding a shovel, breaking ground, smile genuine. She's home. At 26, I built my life around a man. At 48, I'm building an empire that will outlast both of us. That's not revenge. That's legacy. Fade to black. White text appears. Some endings are beginnings in disguise. Sometimes the person who breaks your heart is actually breaking open the door to who you were always meant to be. 3-second pause. New text. What empire have you been calling a hobby? Hold on black screen. Let the question breathe. Then, if this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. What moment spoke to you most? Have you ever discovered your worth after someone dismissed it? Have you ever been called a hobby when you were building an empire? Let's build a community of late bloomers and empire builders. Subscribe for more stories of transformation, resilience, and second chances, because your story isn't over. It's just changing chapters. And sometimes, the best chapters come after the worst endings.